Good morning, folks. How's everybody doing? We're going to talk about Boris Johnson and the fact that the Conservative Party has just announced an investigation into Boris Johnson for criticizing the burqa. So give me one moment. Okay, we got it. Ricky says I postponed the scope. So if you aren't aware, I normally focus on American news, but except for the fact that I've been talking about Tommy Robinson a lot. Anyway, basically, to get the story straight, Boris Johnson, who was recently the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom, that's the equivalent to the Secretary of State, he, in an article, in an editorial, he posted and essentially discussed the burqa, and he said, well, he thinks that people should have the right to wear the burqa. He said he thinks it's ridiculous and that women wearing the burqa look like bank robbers or letterboxes, and that it also demonstrates, I think he said, that it demonstrates a lack of assimilation. And in response to this article, the British conservatives, not just the British liberals, the British conservatives are furious about it, right? British conservatives have not called on Boris to apologize. The party leader and the Prime Minister, Theresa May, have called on Boris to say he has to apologize for these comments. And Boris refused, as he damn well should. And in response, the British Conservative Party is now launching an investigation of Boris over his comments. Leave aside the fact that, what exactly is there to investigate here? He wrote an op-ed. It says what it says. Are you going to, investigate him and inquire deeply into his mind as to what he was thinking when he was criticizing the burqa? But all that aside, what it demonstrates is that these British conservatives are not conservatives in any meaningful way. Because to indulge the idea that criticism of the burqa is racist, that criticism of the burqa is Islamophobic, requires a level of cultural relativism that cannot possibly be called conservative. Because the burqa is not even a religion. The burqa certainly has nothing to do with a race. The burqa is an article of clothing, and it is an odious article of clothing. It is an article of clothing that is a manifestation of patriarchy and oppression. It is a manifestation of a Jim Crow-like social system where people are conditioned to believe that they should walk around in public unseen because to do otherwise would be inappropriate. That is something that should be absolutely and completely rejected by any right-thinking person, right? The burqa is wrong. Now, again, the question of whether or not you should ban the burqa is a much more challenging one, right? And I think that the ultimate right answer is no, you shouldn't ban it, because if you live in a country with free expression, people can wear what they want, and that's a basic rule. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong to criticize people's clothing choices, right? Even in America, if you wear bizarre clothing, people will criticize you for it. Remember Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake? Cassandra says you should ban it. And I don't actually think, I think it's a close question, because there's another side to this argument, which is, what if people are being forced to wear the burqa? Right? If the underlying social problem is that women in Islamic communities, some in particularly radical sections of them, obviously we're not talking about all Muslims here, we're talking about a subset, but if women in that particular subset of those communities are wearing burqas, are they being forced to? Is that really part of a free society? Moreover, as Cassandra points out, there's a security issue, right? Should people be able to walk around masked? We talk about the fact that people are walking around masked like Antifa. There are perfectly good reasons to think that in a modern society, you don't want people to be able to walk around masked. You want their whole face to be recognized. So there's a lot of very compelling security reasons, worries about individual, stopping oppression, internal oppression within Islamic communities, to suggest that perhaps the burqa should be banned. But that's not even the argument. That's not what British conservatives are criticizing him for. They're criticizing him for making fun of the burqa. You know what's good about Boris Johnson? He's not apologizing. And here's another fact that's really interesting. 60% of the British public is with Boris Johnson on this question. They just did polling. It's 60-29 approving of Boris's statements. And the Conservative Party, do you think any of those 29 are conservative voters? How many? 5%, 10%? The vast majority of the British public, independents and conservatives, think, yeah, the burqa is obnoxious, because of course the burqa is obnoxious. Think about what the burqa is. It's one of two things worn in public. It's a manifestation of one of two phenomena. One, it's a manifestation of complete rejection of the host society that you're living in, right? Like, to wear a burqa is to reject voluntarily and, with your own volition, is to reject assimilation, is to reject the idea that you're a part of the fabric of the country, and rather to say that I will remain isolated and cocooned within a garment and reject the belief system of the broader society. So that's one option. Option number two is that you're being forced to wear it, in which case it's an instantiation of a Jim Crow-like social system. Right? Either way, it's deeply worthy of criticism and something that Western society should be able to stand up and say no. Moreover, to suggest that any criticism of it is Islamophobic is exactly the line that Wahhabi preachers want you to take, because it means that they're allowed to impose their social system on Islamic communities without any criticism from people who are like, hey, what you're doing is patriarchal and oppressive. Again, explain to me how this isn't the most incredible instantiation of patriarchy. And to see British feminists coming out and say, how dare you criticize the burqa? How dare you criticize it? I mean, it's shocking to me. The social system that the people who brought forth the burqa seek to impose would be so retrograde, so archaic, so anti-feminism that it would almost be appalling. So what does it say about the British government? Well, it says what we already know, right? The British conservatives don't represent the public. As somebody pointed out, they're like the GOP establishment. And in Britain, there's the elite urban-rural dynamic is even more pronounced there, and the class dynamic is even more pronounced in Britain. So you have this cloistered group of conservative elites who all went to the best schools like Oxford and Cambridge, representing the public, their constituency, which is completely alienated from that perspective. So obviously they can think in their own, privileged cloistered areas of London that of course it's okay to say that the burqa is fine. But in reality, when you actually go out there and you talk about how you talk to average people, they're like, we don't like the burqa, and it's not wrong to. I don't need to out my dad for it, but I went to a Muslim wedding last week, and I was very happy for my little cousin and his new wife, and I'm very happy to meet everybody. But the burqa is still a very shocking garment. It puts a barrier between you and the other person, and it's something that even my little cousin's mother, my aunt, who is extremely liberal, anti-Trump, was talking about how she didn't like the burqa. It's this is a normal mainstream opinion to look at the burqa and be like, that's not our society. That offends some of our most basic values, our basic liberal values. Okay? Our toleration of it is an instantiation of liberal values too, but by the same token, the actual clothing itself is also a violation of those values. And to say that criticizing it, even mocking it, is somehow Islamophobic, is racist, it's just not true. And it's indicative of a party that's completely lost the plot. So, I've put forward the hashtag regime change for UK. It's only, flippantly, right? I look at the British government as one that is often deeply unfriendly to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, essentially enforces medieval Islamic blasphemy law, which is effectively what they're doing now. They're saying, how dare you criticize the burqa? That's hate speech. You should be investigated. What planet are these people on? So we need some sort of regime change in the sense that the Theresa May government has got to go for their failures on the lines of Brexit as much as anything else. But also, Boris has just made himself a really good prime ministerial candidate. If you don't doubt that a majority of the British public isn't with Boris on this question and will find his treatment appalling and will think that Theresa May needs to go, you're wrong. And all the people who are criticizing it and saying, how dare Boris exploit this, look in the mirror. Exploiting it is real. What do you call something exploiting it when it's what 60% of the public believe? It's not exploiting a belief. It's reflecting the beliefs of the British public, which say, no, actually, this is ridiculous and we shouldn't have to tolerate it. So that's the underlying point. Boris is going to be a very compelling PM candidate. The British people should realize that they don't have to stick with their crappy right-wing party, that they're entitled to a better one that actually is conservative and isn't engaging in this disgusting form of cultural relativism that indulges instantiations of patriarchy and oppression. Rather, they can have a conservative party that fights for their own values and fights for Western values and liberal values and says, no, while we will certainly tolerate you wearing the burqa in public, we will feel perfectly free to make fun of it, and we will strongly discourage you from wearing it in modern Western society. And that's what should happen. So, good for Boris Johnson, good for him for not apologizing, and shame on the Conservative Party of Britain, Theresa May, and the leader of the Conservative Party in Britain, and most of the media there for trying to shame a view and impose and enforce socially medieval Islamic blasphemy law. If you've enjoyed this, you can follow me at Will Chamberlain on Twitter, at Will Chamberlain on Periscope. To follow me on Periscope, click that little ... in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and click the follow button. I do appreciate it, and that way you'll get notifications whenever I go live and have insightful things to say. So, thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.